Welcome to the story world. In a lush green village, where the morning began with the sweet chirping of birds and the cool, refreshing scent of neem trees, lived a hard-working farmer with his wife. His name was John. They owned a small plot of land where they toiled day and night to grow vegetables, earning their livelihood by selling them at the market. Although John's farm was modest in size, thanks to his diligent labor, the tomatoes, pumpkins, and eggplants grown there were considered the freshest in the entire village. Right in the center of the village lay a beautiful and vast lake, the water of which remained as clear as glass. An ancient temple dedicated to a goddess stood upon the banks of this lake. Both the lake and a massive mango tree growing nearby were held in deep reverence by the villagers. In times of joy, the villagers would offer grains to the fish in the lake and present the luscious mangoes from the tree on its banks as offerings to the goddess. Consequently, a strict rule prevailed in the village. No one was permitted to catch fish from the lake or pluck mangoes from the tree for their own personal gain. The villagers observed this rule with unwavering devotion, for they believed that the goddess safeguarded their crops. John, too, was aware of this rule. However, he was somewhat greedy and careless by nature. That day, the heat in the market was scorching. John had set out in the morning with his finest produce, but the market was unusually sparse that day, and customers offered very low prices for his vegetables. By the time evening fell, he found himself with far less money in his pockets than he had anticipated. On his way home, he noticed a wealthy merchant in the market selling expensive, luscious mangoes and fresh fish that had been brought in from the city. John was left utterly astounded when he heard the prices of these items. He thought to himself,
I work so incredibly hard, yet I can barely afford a single decent meal for myself. And here, people are willing to pay such a fortune for just a small fish.
for the first time, a hint of bitterness toward his small farm and his own hard work took root in his mind. He began to ponder that if only he possessed something he could sell without having to toil for it, his life would be completely transformed. This was the moment when his faith began to waver, and his gaze drifted toward the village's sacred pond, a place he had until now viewed merely as a matter of religious custom. One sweltering afternoon, John was passing by the temple. His basket was empty of vegetables, as he was returning home after having sold them all. Just then, his eyes fell upon a massive mango tree. The tree was laden with mangoes. They looked so succulent that John's mouth began to water. He glanced around. The road was deserted, the priest was resting inside the temple, and not a single villager was anywhere in sight. John thought to himself,
What difference could just one mango make? Who would even notice a mango hanging so high up?
seizing this opportune moment, he moved with swift agility and plucked the largest, juiciest mango from the tree. The instant he plucked the fruit, he felt as though a sudden, cool gust of wind swept toward him and whispered into his ear.
Don't do it.
John was startled. He spun around to look, but there was no one there. He brushed aside his fear and headed toward the edge of the pond to wash the mango before eating it. As soon as John reached the water's edge and began to rinse the mango in the pond, he noticed several large fish swimming beneath the surface. These fish had been nurtured there for years and had grown so massive that the sight of them made John's eyes light up with excitement.
Wow, such plump fish. If I were to sell these at the market, I could buy enough food to last me for 10 days.
Greed had blinded him. He forgot everything: the sacred rules, the goddess, and his fear of the villagers. Without a moment's hesitation, he pulled an old net from his satchel, and in no time at all, caught half a dozen large fish from the lake. He ate a juicy mango, picked up the basket filled with fish, and happily headed back home. Upon reaching the house, his wife Annie asked,
"Oh, wow, where did you get such fine fish today?"
John lied.
I bought these fish at the market.
But John was restless. His happiness was fleeting. He could not sleep a wink all night. The moment he closed his eyes, he began to see the helpless eyes of those fish floating in the water, and he could hear the whispering murmur of the cool breeze drifting in from the mango tree. The next morning, with the very first ray of the sun, when John rose, his body felt heavy, and he was overcome by a strange sense of dread. He thought, perhaps, it was merely his exhaustion. As usual, he headed toward his fields, the very place where the fruits of his hard labor flourished. But the instant he set foot within the boundaries of his field, he let out a piercing scream. A layer resembling black ash had settled all around his field. He observed that his tallest maize plants, which had stood proudly just yesterday, lay fallen on the ground today, as if someone had crushed them. The most terrifying detail was that there was not a single drop of water near the roots of those plants, even though he had irrigated the field only the day before. The soil there had cracked wide open. Just then, he noticed his neighbor Stefan, a fellow farmer, calling out to him from his own field. Stefan said,
John, did you have a dream last night? Lightning flashed near the lake last night, yet there wasn't a single cloud in the sky. People are saying that the goddess is displeased, and just look at the state your field is in.
John's heart leaped into his throat. He felt as though every element of nature, the soil, the wind, and the plants, was looking upon him with eyes of scorn. Now, John realized the magnitude of his error. He understood that this was the wrath of the goddess, unleashed because he had desecrated sacred things out of sheer self-interest. Weeping bitterly, he returned home and confessed the entire truth to his wife. Annie shook her head sorrowfully.
"John, the goddess or god does not reside solely within the walls of a temple. The divine is present within nature itself. Everyone had a rightful claim to that tree, and those fish deserve to live in safety. Driven by greed, you have snatched away what rightfully belonged to others."
Hearing his wife's words, John was overcome with deep remorse. He rose instantly, gathered the few surviving fish, and ran toward the lake. Upon reaching the temple, the very first thing he did was bow his head before the goddess and seek forgiveness. He released all the fish back into the pond and placed a beautiful fruit beneath the tree as an offering. He made a silent vow to himself that he would never again succumb to greed in his life and would always respect nature. The moment John released the fish, a miracle occurred. The water in the pond became even more pristine and clear than before. In that instant, John felt the heavy burden lift from his soul. When he returned to his fields that evening, he discovered that his withered crops had once again become lush and fresh. From that day forward, John never gave in to greed again. He became the most honest farmer in the village. This story teaches us: public resources and traditions exist to maintain the balance of nature. Causing them harm for the sake of personal self-interest is detrimental to both society as a whole and oneself. John stole for the sake of a meager gain, yet in return, he found himself on the verge of losing the fruits of all his hard labor. Greed invariably blinds a person. Merely asking for forgiveness is not enough. True redemption lies in rectifying one's mistakes and resolving to remain honest in the future.
Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Also press the bell icon.